Hey dads, this is John Profit with BeDadly.com. Just wanted to let you know we have a new sponsor coming on board, Genesee Nutrition. One of our earlier podcast guests, Will Carr, is the founder of that company, and basically they're nutrition bars. They're very, very good tasting nutrition bars, great for taking on the trail or, an impromptu little day trip. You can just throw them in your backpack and be ready to rock. And so as a sponsor, we are offering our listeners a 15% discount. So if you go to GeneseeNutrition.com and make your order, be sure to put in code BeDadly15 and you'll get 15% off of your order. So yeah, if you're a nutrition bar aficionado, go ahead and check them out at GeneseeNutrition.com and make sure to use your coupon code BeDadly15. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the BeDadly podcast, where we discuss all things dadly, from being an entrepreneur while caring for toddlers to raising screenagers and talking the birds and the bees. We're here to help you traverse the vast and dynamic landscape of fatherhood. Enjoy practical advice, lots of puns, and even a few heart-touching moments.
And the dad jokes are pretty good too.
And now your host, Brandon Jones.
And just like that, we are back, folks. I'm Brandon Jones. Welcome back to the BeDadly podcast. Today, I am with Brice Mcbeth. Brice is an awesome guest. He is actually one of the winners of our fishing trip giveaway, which was super, super cool. We had a lot of fun. We're going to tell you all about it. But a little bit about Brice. Brice is the founder of Reap Commerce. He's an e-commerce marketer, founder of a great company. They're up in Dallas. And coincidentally enough, you actually knew one of my good buddies and business partners, Sam Elick from Brain Juice. And that was just completely coincidental, which was really, really super cool. I found that out in the boat in the middle of the ocean. And he's like, wait, you know Sam? So that was super cool. We shared that contact. And Brice, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And just by the way, I got to give a shout out to Will Carr too, because he was the guy that originally referred me over to you guys and told me I needed to listen to your podcast, number one. And then number two, I needed to enter that sweepstakes or your giveaway. So that was definitely the first point of contact there was Will Carr. He's amazing.
Yeah, Will is amazing. And actually, that reminds me, Will has actually sponsored this podcast. He has given us a little sponsorship, and we're super, super grateful to him and Genesee Nutrition. They make the tastiest bars. If you haven't had them, they are absolutely delicious. It's like 20 grams of protein, super healthy, really high quality products. You can put in BeDadly15 and get 15% off your purchase. So just look up Genesee Nutrition, and a huge shout out and thanks to Will as well for that. And yeah, Brice, so you get this message. He says, "Hey, check this out and enter the sweepstakes." And then I remember I'm at my office and I'm like about to do the winner. I've got a Google spreadsheet pulled up and I've got all the contacts in there. And then I put in this random number generator and I click random number generate between 1 and whatever our contacts were. And then all of a sudden Google throws out the number and I look at it on the line. I'm like, Brice Mcbeth, you are the winner of the.
That was really weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I told my kids there were like thousands of entries and that was the one that got picked. And it was funny because your number was fairly low.
It was low. Yeah, I know that. I was like, whoa,
that just means I was one of the first in, guys. Like, this is a rare treat. No, but it's amazing. They, regardless, we had so much fun. Thanks for drawing my name. I know maybe that was intentional. I don't know.
No, totally 100% it was completely random. And it happens to be my father's favorite number. He's March 3rd. And I remember whenever it hit it, I was like, whoa, a 3. And then like in my head, I was expecting a higher number, but I was like, we did ask for a random number. I mean, it didn't say like, hey, throw the random number out of the high numbers. It was just like, throw us a random number. And it literally, I was like 3. It just shocked me at first. And I was like, wait, there he is, Brice Mcbeth. I'm like, that's it. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. Well, it gave me a chance to talk about statistics, my boys, and the likelihood that the 3 would show up on a scale from 1 to 100 versus 1 to 10,000. So
right,
it's as likely as any other number is what it turns out to be. So
yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah,
It's my new favorite number. That's for sure.
Totally. Well, and I think it is a lucky number. My dad is kind of ingrained that in me. He's like, three's a lucky number. There's like the Holy Trinity. There's just so many things that relate to three. But man, so we had an awesome trip. We went down to the coast, right? We got you 2 nights on the coast, put you in an Airbnb, one that I've actually stayed in a few times. That's a very comfortable, simple place to be, well located. Tell me about, like, first of all, did the boys have fun?
Man, I don't even know where to start with this. And I have so much gratitude for this trip. And dude, thank you so much again. I don't know if I've said it enough, but thank you so much for the experience. The kids had so much fun. It's crazy because that week, I'm trying to think, it was the weekend before Easter.
Yep.
And they had a few days off from school. And I was like, we're going to make the drive down. I was sort of like, I wasn't dreading it, but I was a little sort of intimidated by the 6.5 hour drive
right
there and then back. And we were on a little bit of a time crunch. So we fished that last day and came back. But between the drive there and back, and then, it was kind of drizzling and kind of cloudy and cool, the couple days we were there. And, it's funny, even on the drive down there, like I never once heard them say, I'm bored, or they want to go home, or they want to do something else. They had so much fun. And the unfortunate thing is there was a little bit of a vacation hangover coming back. Like they kept asking me when we were going to go again, and if you could be our guide again, and if we could go where those guys caught those huge redfish.
Yes.
We saw hauling them in. I was like, man, that is a long boat ride out there, but I'll see what we can do. If you guys are committed, then I'll look into it. So they're anxious for our next trips, and I don't even know where to start with it. So we need to talk after this podcast.
We do. Yeah. Let's put it on the calendar. Yeah. We'll go to Baffin Bay or to the land cut. Really, it's funny. The winds were so bad. And they were kind of hit or miss. We ended up getting some, less windy moments at times. But I know the day leading up to you guys coming, they were super bad. And, one of the things about the ocean, I grew up fishing my whole life, and, I didn't even know this really until I got older and started running a boat and stuff like that. But waves are one thing that you worry about, but wind is actually the thing you have to worry about the most. I used to think, what's the waves? What are the waves doing in terms of, are there big swells? Are there small swells, especially when it comes to saltwater fishing? And then as I got, into running my own boat, I realized over time and learned it has nothing to do with the wave size. Wave size can be one thing, but if the winds pick up, those all change. Every one of the waves are really impacted by the wind. So the wind condition is everything. And one of the things about wind condition too is you're running, for example, kind of into the wind and the waves are splashing against the boat, you're just getting sprayed the whole time. And it can be hard, especially if you have to go a certain direction for a long period of time, and you're just going to get slapped with waves the entire time. It'll make a pretty miserable crew.
Yeah, the boys seem to be pretty resilient though.
100%.
And I remember being like cold and it being windy that first night or whatever. And they were still good to go. They never once like said, hey, when are we going home? When are we going back? I'm hungry. I'm cold. Like they just were good. They were getting in the water. Dude.
That's what I was going to say. So they literally walked off in the water. I was like, wow, these guys are troopers. And they definitely have grit, man. I'll say you've raised some boys with some real grit. Maybe they were caught up in the moment. I don't know. But I remember your little guys were like, we're going in. They just walked right in the water, felt the water out, chased some crabs, chased some little things, and then got back in the boat. And then for the rest of the time, I was like, dude, I wouldn't want to be wet right now. And I was really, really impressed.
Yeah, I think there was part of it. They were just in the moment. I think they get some of that toughness from their mom. I'm kind of a cold water wimp. But they get a lot of that toughness and grit from their mom. She's super tough, but yeah, man, they loved it and they wanted to be out there all day. They kept, hounding you to be able to drive the boat, which you're super cool about, like sharing that and letting them do it when they could. And that was a big takeaway for them, just as much as catching the fish, just being out there. Like I loved how they just enjoyed every part of it, between like getting in the water, driving the boat, riding in the boat, eating the sandwiches, drinking. We kicked back some root beers.
Oh yeah.
Just everything. There was nothing they disliked about it. It was just so great. Even like on the way down there, like, I think back on the road trip itself, like, we stopped in Waco at health camp. I don't know if you've been to health camp before.
Yeah. You're telling me about this. Tell the listeners what health camp in Waco is.
Yeah, health camp. Here's a free plug for a health camp. But it's this amazing dive that's kind of like an old Dairy Queen, I guess. But they have like 3 different types of cheeseburgers and 50 different types of milkshakes. So I remember Breck, and my youngest ended up getting if I can remember, it was like a chocolate chip with cherry and mint, like peppermint. That is a crazy combination. But I mean, you can get any kind of shake that you can, if you can dream it up, like they can make it.
That's so cool.
And then my oldest ate like maybe a 1 pound hamburger or something insane. And we literally I knew we were going to stop on the way down there. Cause I think we drove down on a Wednesday, midday, and we weren't scheduled to fish until Thursday. So we're going to stop somewhere along the way. And I figured we'd stop in either Austin or San Antonio. I've been to Austin, a million times, went to school in Austin, but, so I kind of like was honing in on San Antonio, but I semi-intentionally, that's just how I roll. I did not have a hotel reservation.
Yep.
So I let them, when we stopped and pulled over and ate at the health camp, I let them pick the hotel on the Hotel Tonight app.
Cool.
And I let them kind of fight through like the, how much it's going to cost and what the trade-off is for being close to the Alamo versus what the ratings were. I let them kind of like piece through that. That was pretty fun to watch, and just let them make the decision. So it's funny. They picked a pretty good one for the price. Probably, I'm kind of a hotel snob too, so it's probably not the one I would have picked.
Right.
But I appreciated them being the custodian of my budget.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was great.
I think it's like with the driving thing. As soon as I think one of them said, can I drive? And I said, of course you can. Yeah. I said, it's going to, it's not this moment, but the moment that I know you're clear to drive, yeah, you can 100% drive. I've always noticed that whenever I give a child the opportunity to do something that some people might think is beyond their abilities or beyond, their age or something like that they step up. I see them step up in their body. At first they might like not really take it seriously. And all of a sudden, oh wait, this is serious. Like I'm really like doing this thing, I talk about letting my little guy run the weed eater. I've got a 6-year-old and he can run the weed eater and he does great. He puts the safety goggles on and he runs that weed eater and he knows where to use it. And I remember the first time we did it out with it, my neighbors were driving by and like waving at me like, what's going on here? Yeah. But that was a huge boost for him. He's like, I'm using a power tool basically, not going to let him run the saw or something like that, but a little weed eater action never hurt no one. And, wouldn't let him run. I wouldn't let my little guy run the lawnmower, mainly because of his size and the blade and things like that. But there is like giving them the opportunity, like you did with the hotel. Hey, would you guys like to pick out the hotel? Here are the things that we need to think about, right? The location, the rating, the price. Let's kind of map all those and see where you guys can arrive at in terms of the thing. I think that's super, super cool.
Yeah, I don't know how related this is, but that kind of you kind of talking about the lawn care stuff reminded me about my dad, and I think there's some things that I do similarly because my dad did it, and there's other things that I do differently because
your dad
I didn't want to do it the way my dad did it.
Right.
And there's so many ways that I've like become my dad, but there's also like other ways that I find that I let them. I feel like when, looking back, I remember my dad being a really good coach. Like when we go play golf, and he would tell me how to have the right like swing, or how to fix a problem or whatever. And I think in some ways it was great because I learned a lot about the game, but it also, at a young age, I was kind of stressed out by golf, and I kind of got to a point where I didn't like it. So it's now when I'm like with my kids, one of the ways I'm intentionally different than my dad is I'll just let them play like their game. And if they need some help, like kind of back to the hotel story, like if they need some help, they'll ask me and I'll weigh in. So if they make a mistake, then, and that's when they need help, is fixing the mistake, then at least I can like empathize with them and kind of help them, coach them through it or whatnot. But when it comes to stuff like golf, I just let them play their game. And if their game means like they're going to eat like 8 Snickers bars and like skip half the holes and drive a couple holes and, do it their way, or drop on the green. Like
pick the ball up and drop on. Yeah. Pick up the ball and drop on the green. Yeah.
I just don't want to like drill it into their head that it's like all business. But I'm probably, kind of back to what I was saying. It's like, in some ways I'm very intentionally like my dad. Mm-hmm. In other ways, I'm very intentionally like not like my dad. But sometimes I don't know which ones are the right times and the wrong times to do it. I just kind of make it up as I go, I feel like. But it all seems to work out. The hotel thing certainly worked out. So.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how we can make a miserable trip out of something like a golf experience by being overly critical, or by thinking that the child needs to do it one specific way. And when it was supposed to be such a pleasant experience, and then all of a sudden it turned into like where the child just felt like, well, I'm not doing any of this right, know? And I do think there's also a balance, right? Because there's like, well, it is good for the child to learn the rules of the game, things like that. But I also think there's a time and a place when a child is interested in knowing more about the rules, and when they just want to learn how to physically connect with a club and a ball and an experience. And, it's funny. I try to embody this with my children, is like, say, and I've told them, the more you know about something, the more fun it can be. Like if you don't know anything about football and you just watch people run, okay, they're tackle, and you don't really understand what's going on, it's not as enjoyable as when you really do understand what the purpose is and why this can't be that way, or it can be, like why rules are called one way or another. And the more you know, it's like kind of the more entertaining it is, because otherwise, it just looks like guys running up and down a field. And yeah, you can maybe be shocked by their athleticism, but of course also kids. I mean, my 6-year-old is not going to sit through a lesson on how football works, where my 16-year-old, because everybody's talking about football, he might be more interested. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same here. Totally the same here. It's funny, and they get different things from that, like teaching. Like my oldest is very competitive, and he loves sports, and he, because he's really competitive, he wants to know all the rules out in front of him, and he wants to know some of the strategies. He gets frustrated really easily if it doesn't work out first, because he's so competitive. He wants to win every single time. And it's funny, by the way, what I'm telling you actually plays out really funny when we all play cards together that go really into poker. So just to sort of, I'll use that kind of as my example. Like you teach them the rules of poker, right? And the oldest one is all about competition and winning, and he gets really frustrated from hand to hand if he didn't win that hand. The second one is really kind of brainy and thoughtful, has an engineering mind, and everything else comes second. So he's trying to count the cards and trying to like anticipate the odds of certain cards hitting. And he's only 9, but he is really good about like knowing, what the likelihood of something happening is or not.
Right.
And if it doesn't go his way, he knows that more cards are coming. As long as he has chips, he's still in the game, and he doesn't get too emotionally pulled into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one is just all about comic relief. So he's like all in, Breck's all in on every hand. He's cracking everybody up, and it's funny because he's the one that always wins at the end of the game. Because you know, he just lets it go.
Man. It's energy.
Because he doesn't care, because nothing phases him, and he's just, maybe that's a lesson in life, right? Maybe they're the ones. Maybe we're getting hoodwinked. We're getting taught by our kids how to live life. Just let
100%.
go a little bit. Just let go a little bit.
And go all in sometimes.
Go all in. Yeah.
You know, that's the abundance mindset. I mean, there are people out there that are really, really, really tight with everything, and that's how they do things. They're calculated. They like for things to go on schedule, on plan. They want to know how things are going to turn out. They want to forecast. Mm-hmm. And I've met successful people like that. The most successful person that I have ever known is not like that at all. Mm-hmm. He's calculated in some ways, but what I would say more so is he's about the energy. The energy, he's more about the energy of abundance, and that it's free flowing. It's about nurturing. It's about pushing. It's about being willing to say, hey, let's put it all in. Let's see what happens. Like, let's go for something. And then knowing that we can always keep picking up the pieces and do whatever we need to. We can solve things at the end. And also, you know, it's kind of like I was, had a friend over, or I actually had a few friends over on Saturday, and I was showing them this glass piece. It's a glass blown jellyfish. I grew up in Florida and I love sea life. And obviously I'm a big fan of the ocean. Someone got me that as a gift, and, they were worried. I said, here, hold it. You know, it's a really crazy piece of glass and it's cool to look at. And they were like, oh yeah. They're like, oh, you know, acting like they're dropping it. And I'm like, honestly, if you dropped it, I'd actually care more about the floor, because I'd be like, poor wood. That thing is dense, you know? And they were like, man, this is expensive though. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, seriously, if you're going to get hung up over something like that, you know, I mean, things come and go. That's life. Like that thing, if you accidentally drop that thing, it's not the end of the world. Like that's just the way things are. And I found that I'd say it's not about being detached, because I care about my things, but it's about being, I think it's about being like having the mindset that the world is so abundant. If that thing were to break, I'm going to have another thing in my lifetime that's going to be cooler or whatever. I mean, like, I don't know. I don't get too hung up with things. I used to, when I was little, my siblings would break everything that I had. And I was really like OCD about everything, because I couldn't keep a nice thing. Like little siblings that broke everything. But now as I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot more relaxed about certain things. Now I still want things to be taken care of a certain way, but I'm way less, I don't know. I'll let people, for example, let the kids drive the boat. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to be like, no, they'll break it. They can't touch the boat. You know, I'll let my friends drive my vehicles. Like, I'm kind of that kind of way. And I'm really, I think I learned that from this really successful guy I'm talking about. He honestly, he'd let you drive his cars. He's just like, they're cars. This is what, I mean, it's a car. It's whatever. If you look at it like, oh my gosh, it's a car, and you make it a big deal, then you kind of are living in a scarcity mindset. And like with the all in kind of mindset, it's kind of like, it's a car. They make them every year. They're going to come out with more every single year. You're going to have more cars in your life. It's literally a car. That's what it is. And just kind of have a different mindset about it. And obviously, I don't know which came first, right? Did his mindset about things like cars come because he's so wealthy that he has a ton of cars and it doesn't really matter? Or does he have a ton of cars and it doesn't really matter because he has that mindset? You see what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you go either way. I mean, you find examples of both, right? Like, it's probably just part of him, and then his experiences help shape or accentuate what he already was. But
Right.
yeah, I can relate to a lot of what you said. I feel like I've always been someone who values more experiences and like connect. Even as a kid, I remember just being really in tune with my emotions and just enjoying time. And I think in my life, I've probably gotten to a point where I've chased the items, but have recently been reminded just through life experiences and, partially in just being a dad that, the stuff is just stuff. And actually have done a lot of like research on minimalism and have sort of embraced that lifestyle. And not that I quest to have nothing, but just everything has a real like purpose to it. And I think that's been like a really good kind of tying this back to the kids. Like that's just been a really good conversation to have with the kids when they want, a toy, or they want like something, or they want, they want something. Right. And so it's this conversation about, well, does this, is this something we want, or is this something we need? So there's that first conversation.
Right.
And then like, does this actually make us a better person if we have this? And then after you at least know the answer, then it's up to them to decide if like this is something they want. Then they have to make a trade-off of, okay, well, if I have this, then maybe I can't have something else, or, I'm not really strict about like whether they use their money they've saved or if I help them pay for it. We'll kind of take each case by case, like that may be the right thing, that may be the wrong thing. But I feel like a lot of what you just described relates to a lot of the stuff that we're going through right now with trying to, not have too much stuff and really be like conscious of what we do have, and being conscious of if it actually improves us as people, if it improves our ability to experience each other or the world or whatever. That's probably
right.
That's gets super deep, and maybe it's maybe kind of overthinking it a little bit at times, but because sometimes kids just got to be kids. And
well, we're living in a very materialistic time. So I think it's great that you're inviting these conversations into their upbringing, where it's like, hey, we can, let's say we got all that stuff. Does it really make us happier? Do we really feel more connected with one another? I mean, look at how advanced technology has gotten. Have we gotten more connected? Maybe we know more about the world events. Maybe we're more aware of things that are going on. We're certainly not living in the dark ages where the ruling class has all the knowledge and we don't. That's true. I would say there's a benefit there. But my oldest son, Sheldon, who has a cell phone, are him and I more connected because of the cell phone? I would argue not, because honestly, I was, even this morning, we're on the way to school and he was telling me about his, he's like, yeah, I'm doing my, what does he call them? Streaks or something. This is on Snapchat, which I have a whole thing about Snapchat I could talk about, but I let him use it. I would say I'm pretty permissive with technology, but but it's important. This is where I say it's important. I'm very strict about, we have to have conversations about it. And you have to be willing to reflect with me on what's going on and what you see as the challenges and things like that. So this morning, the conversation was, tell me about streaks. And he's like, tell me all about it. And I said, how much time does that take you? And he's like, tell him, well, I got to click on this. I got to do that. I got to send this. And I was like, yeah, what do you think the screen time is? Go ahead and look at your screen time data. So he looks at screen time data and he's pulling up his screen time data for that particular app. And it was almost 4 hours a day. I said, so let's do some math real quick. I said, first of all, is that surprising to you? He's like, actually, I thought it was going to be higher. I was like, dude, that's insane. That's an insane amount of time to be looking at your phone. He's like, I don't do it all at once. I'm like, I get it. It's accumulated. But even with it being accumulated, look at how much time that is. I said, so just take 4 hours a day. Okay. And let's say it's 30 days in a month. So now we're looking at 120 hours, right? A month. And I said, so you're basically telling me, I was like, you're using 120 hours. I said, let's just say that, you get 12 hours of productive time a day. That's 10 days a month. 1/3 of the month you're spending doing this.
Yeah. What if you had just an extra 4 hours a day to just do something you
with an extra
really wanted to do?
Yeah. And I said, I said, what do you think? I said, what do you want to do? I said, what could you do with 4 hours a day? And he's like, dude, if I worked out 4 hours a day, I would be so jacked. I said, yes, you would be jacked. I said, what else? I said, what about like making money? What if you built a business as a kid? You're a teenager. Everybody else is spending 4 hours a day. Because I know he's probably an average, right? Everybody else averaging 4 hours a day on this. Imagine you did the exact opposite of what they did, and you spent it on building a small business or doing something online that could generate income. What would that be like? And he's like, dude, I'd have so much money. I was like, yeah, so cool. I said, so yeah, maybe you think about that. He's like, even if I just did half of that time. And I'm like, yeah. So like, I'm just reflecting with him. I'm not telling him, you got to do this, you got to do that. I'm taking away the phone. I'm taking, because I don't think that really helps. You know what I mean? Like for me, I don't want to be considered a permissive parent. So I have boundaries. There's boundaries around respect. There's boundaries around time, like for example, curfews and stuff like that. But when it comes to some of this technology stuff, I'm like, the moment he's out of my sight, which next year he'll be 18, the moment he's out of my sight, he's going to run to this stuff if I've sat there and not processed it with him. When now he's in my house, we can process it. Like I can actually talk to him about this stuff. And so we talk about digital addictions and we talk about this screen usage of time. And then, I see him make new decisions and come up with new ways of operating with his technology. And I see him make more mature choices from those conversations as opposed to it being like top down. I really try to bring it from the inside out.
Yeah. There's a difference too between having this openness and being able to talk about it and helping them understand what their choices are and what the consequences are. And it's amazing how smart they become when you just let them like think through it themselves. And you still can that still gives you you're still the parent, so you can put your foot down and draw a boundary and, not let them be disrespectful to other people or whatever. But this reminds me a lot of like your story about the cherry pie, how you discipline your boy with a cherry pie. That's one of my favorite stories. I think it's from your episode with your dad or whatever. But our parents used to say like, I don't know about all of our parents, but none of my parents would say like, they would have, there's real strict rules, about certain things. Like, we didn't have phones back then, but whether it was the Atari or the Nintendo, there's rules around that and there are consequences. And then, there were certain things that were rules that when you asked, why do I have to do that? And the answer was because I said so. Did your parents ever say that?
Oh, like, yeah.
Because I said so.
Totally.
And it's like, okay, well, I have to obey this person. I think I was pretty respectful of my parents and would do things because they said so. My brother was a different story. But also felt like, when my wife and I chose to have kids, we were very intentional about explaining to them. Like we kind of expunged because I said so from our from our portfolio of excuses. And we said, we're going to be really intentional about explaining to them why the rule is what it is. So even things like saying cuss words, for instance. Yeah. They'll tell on each other. Like he said this bad word. He said the D word. He said the B word. He said the S word, whatever. I'm like, I don't care. Like, so I'll pull them together. I'll say, hey, I heard somebody said the S word. Like, what's that all about? Like, who did that? And I would ask them, like, why is this word a bad word? Yeah. And they didn't really have an answer. And I said, like, it's a bad word because everybody says it's a bad word, not for any other reason than we just said it's a bad word. Right. So I really don't care what the S you say. So you can say it all you want, but here's the consequence. That's right. Yeah. If you say it, then it's very easy to form a habit. If you're going to have a habit, you're probably going to say it around your friends.
Yeah.
And if you say it around your friends, you're going to be known as the guy who just says the word.
Mm-hmm.
And if you become known as the guy who says the word, then like your friends' parents are going to know that you're that guy, and you're not going to be invited over their house anymore.
Yep.
And they're not going to let your friends come over to our house. So you're probably going to lose a lot of friends if you keep just throwing this around. You know what? When they understand like the consequence and they can choose now to say it or not, like I don't really have to police it. That's not like something I hear from them often. What happens when you're not watching them. And I think that's like your cherry pie story. Like I almost feel like you should tell that story again.
Yeah, I will. And you know, one of the things I love what you're saying, like so sometimes, for example, when I'm talking to dads about discipline, sometimes they think I'm talking about obedience. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I try to snuff out, I guess you could say, is that I don't want to raise obedient children. Mm-hmm. Because there are a lot of things that we need to challenge right now in society. There are a lot of things that need to be challenged. And what I want to raise are self-disciplined children. I want to raise children that have discipline from the inside out, because obedience only works if my eyes can watch you, my ears can hear you, and you know that there will be this direct consequence. What happens when I'm not around? What happens when they're somewhere where they have total freedom? You know, kids, for example, that don't have any discipline, and I'm talking about that self-discipline. Like, for example, my youngest son, we have firearms in our house, and my youngest son from a very early age has been taught rules about firearms that are very, very important. I told him it can save your life. It can save someone else's life. You have to know these rules. Like the gun is always loaded. And I'm like, I have just hard grain in his life. He's like, what if it's unloaded? No. It's never unloaded. Yeah. It's always loaded. That gun is always loaded. Even if you think it's unloaded, it's loaded. And the reason is because if you ever treat that gun as not being loaded, you'll disrespect the gun and someone could die. So it's very, very important you know that. Number two, you never, ever, ever have your friends or anyone else ever touch the firearm without adult supervision. This is a firearm. These are the kind of things, et cetera, et cetera. And I tell them all that while my stuff is put away. I know there are parents out there, for example, that are going to have guns that kids could access. If the parents weren't around, the child get there. Do I need an obedient child? Well, the obedient child's going to do what the parent says when the parent's around. No, I need a self-disciplined child. I need a child that has discipline from the inside out, so that when that kind of thing happens, they have their own disciplines. They go, no, we don't do that.
It takes so much burden off of the parent too, just to like enjoy the time and know that the child can think through these things. And that's not by any means saying that you shouldn't have this conversation about the consequence of not treating the gun with respect, right?
Right.
Or any other thing in the house.
Exactly.
But it sort of like, you know, not having to police your children, or, you know, it's funny because people who are hardcore, like militant about disciplining their kids, are the same ones who criticize helicopter parents, right? But it's kind of the same thing,
right?
Finding the balance where you expect and demand, you know, respect and just, you know, respect the rules and the boundaries, and these conversations that you're having is like a good balance to not have to helicopter or be militant, and know, like you say, like they're sort of self-governed, right? They can think through their own consequences when you're not around. Then you have a child that's consistently themselves as a good person around you, and when they're not around you.
Yes. And honestly, see, I started off as this extremely diligent, like militant type of father. If I said this is how it goes, this is how it goes. If you do another way, you will be punished. If we have rules around your respect, you say yes, sir, no, sir. You say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. You do this when you're told, et cetera, et cetera. If I say go to sleep, it's time for lights out. If I find you up, you will be in trouble. Those kind of things. I was very strict. And I had a child who was behaviorally challenged. I got custody of him when he was 5. And it was a struggle. It was a very real struggle. And one of the reasons was because, in a way, he was raised without discipline. Now, when I say discipline, I don't mean punishment. I mean, like, literally, like, structure, rules, boundaries, with consequences that were related to the actions that were told in respectful ways that were held. Not punishment like spankings and stuff like that. I actually had to move away from punishment because here's what happened. I get him at 5. He's behaviorally challenged. He's been expelled in kindergarten, which is like I just can't still in my head. I'm like, how do you get expelled from kindergarten? Like, help me out, bro. Like, what could you be doing? But really just wasn't able to manage himself well. And he was later diagnosed with conduct disorder from unspecified trauma. And so I get custody of this child. And I have the parenting belief that if your child does something wrong, you need to make them feel a consequence that is so great that they'll never do that again. Mm-hmm. And it was this belief that was ingrained in me where my parents spanked, pull a switch. At one point when I was little, I had to kneel on rice, which is crazy, pretty old school stuff. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Never heard of that, no.
Yeah, they pour a little rice out on a hardwood floor or on a tile floor, and then you put your knees on it, which ingrains. It doesn't cut you, but it puts these sharp little feelings into your knees. You just kneel on rice, put your nose in the corner, that kind of stuff, real old school stuff. But I was raised on that. And so I thought, when I first got Sheldon, I was like, this kid he has not had any discipline whatsoever. Now, remember, discipline is different. I'm thinking he hasn't been punished ever. Mm-hmm. Right. In my head, I called it discipline, but I've since learned they're very different. Mm-hmm. But basically, I started punishing him. I started spanking him. I said, hey, you do the wrong thing, you're getting spanked. If it's not so severe, you're going to go put your nose in the corner. I would go to events and my son would have his nose in the corner for being, disrespectful or for not listening or something like that. Or I'd have him go into a different room where I had to sit in a different room in a timeout at a social gathering or at a party because he didn't listen. So now he's got to be in timeout. I would threaten him with big, giant threats. Like, if you don't listen to what I'm saying, we're leaving this party. We're going to go home. You'll never come here again, kind of things. And what ended up happening is that, yeah, maybe in the moment he would correct his behavior for a second. But when I looked at things from a bigger picture, I was not getting a better child. He wasn't doing better in school. He was doing a bit better that he wasn't being expelled, but he really wasn't making like any kind of like huge progress at all. And in fact, his self-esteem was coming way down. He went from this bright, cheery kid to starting having a more and more reduced self-esteem till one day he told me he thought he was just a bad kid. He literally said, like, I'm sorry, Dad. Like, I don't mean to make you guys mad. I don't mean to make the teachers mad or you mad. Like, I love you and I'm just a bad kid. That's all it is. And I remember thinking like, dude, no, you are not a bad kid. Like something was inherently wrong with them. So that was a really big turning point. That was like kind of the breaking point where I was like, I got to figure, there's no way that this is the way to do it, you know? And so since then I've changed my perspective and like, we've got to empower our kids. We got to help them, meet their challenges and become more resourceful and use critical thinking and help them become confident children. And one of the best ways to do that is to allow your child to face their own challenges and then be there as a supportive coach, as this teacher who says, hey, I see that you're struggling. For example, my son was struggling with getting up on time. He missed the bus. And I told him, I said, if you miss the bus again, this is my oldest son, my 16-year-old, I'm going to give you, this is what I told him. I said, you have 1 week. And within this week, if you miss the bus again, I will have to solve the problem. I said, you can solve this. I know you can, dude. I've got confidence in you. You can solve whatever the problem is that you're waking up late and you're missing your bus. You have it within you to solve it. However, if you don't solve it, I'm going to create a solution and you're probably not going to like it, but I'm going to create a solution and we'll run my solution for 1 week's time. If my solution works, I would encourage you to embody whatever that solution is. Well, he misses it again. It wasn't right away. It took a couple of days, but he missed it again. He started to kind of get relaxed because at first he had it. First couple of days he had it. He got relaxed. He missed the bus. I said, okay, I want your cell phone at 8:00. I want your computer at 9:00, and I want the router at 9:00. So on cell phone, computer, router, all come in by 9. I want the phone in by 8 so you can go get your shower and do whatever you need to do to prep for the day. So, of course, he's like, oh, Dad, come on. That's early. I said, hey, you had the opportunity to solve this for yourself, And so I took him over, and sure enough, he didn't miss the bus again that whole week. He got up early. He was on time and stuff like that. And I said, what did we learn? He's like, yeah, Dad, I was going to bed way too late. I said, of course. And I knew that, but what was the trigger that was causing you to go to bed late? Yeah, being on my cell phone and my computer. I said, exactly. I said, so now if I hand this over to you, what are you going to do yourself so I don't have to do it for you? He's like, I'm going to totally be in bed by 10. I'm like, okay, let's see it happen. Now he hasn't missed the bus since. So I allowed him to kind of self-govern himself with the cell phone and the computer. And it's like, hey, I know you can do it, but you're going to have to demonstrate it in order to win me over in this way.
Yeah, it's like, think of this, whether you're militant or you're like the way you're describing, as dads, we're just struggling to try to find the way to like help them understand consequences, and just we have different ways of doing it. And if you impose the consequences, I mean, sometimes you just have, like in your case, that example, you had to impose the consequence to inflict a little bit of the pain so that he could see the flip side of going to bed on time. In other cases, like where there's not such a severe, or there's not like a tight time frame or whatever that has to happen. And if you let them, make the mistake, it's a struggle to watch them go through, making a mistake and fail, and the pain on the other end of making that mistake. Yeah. But along the way, you can offer help. And if they don't take it, we can't keep them from pain forever.
Absolutely.
And if they know that you're a good source to go to for advice when they need it, or if they're hurting and you can empathize with them and kind of reflect back on what they could have done differently, then their decision-making gets a lot better, a lot faster. I mean, I found that our kids just make really good, healthy decisions at a much earlier age than probably I did as a kid. And then also just having a better relationship with them and being able to enjoy the time with them, because you're having what feels like a more, mature experience at a younger age. I love what you said about the not raising your kid to be just obedient for the sake of being obedient. Cause I mean, I've made a living off of sort of challenging the status quo. And that's how real innovation happens, right? It's just not by coloring in the lines. Back to just finding a balance. That's kind of where the magic happens. Cause I don't think that means not having any discipline. I don't think that means not putting your foot down. I don't think that means just letting the kid do whatever they want. Yeah. Finding that balance is really kind of where the magic happens, both as an adult and as a child. So. Yeah.
Well, I love what you says, basically we call it natural consequences, where, a child's going to experience a consequence. If they, for example, you try to help them out, you say, hey, make sure you remember your jacket today. If they forget their jacket, you can't go there and just hold the jacket on them or force them to wear the jacket. The natural consequence is they're going to be cold. With my son, the natural consequence of him missing his bus, for example, was that he didn't get to school. He likes getting to school early. He got to school a little later. He didn't necessarily like that. However, because he didn't correct after the second time of that happening, I was kind of imposing a logical consequence that was related to the event, because I knew the cell phone and the computer were what were going on. But I also didn't do that forever. It was just a short period of time where I said, hey, we're going to go a week this way. And then you show me what you learned. I gave you this time period to show me that you've got it. And it's okay. We made a mistake in it, but I'm going to impose this logical consequence on it. And then I'm going to give you a period of time to see what that's like. Because this is what I would have, if I were you, I would have said, hey, I need to cut my cell phone off at a certain time. I need to cut off my computer at a certain time. And then I know I'll get enough sleep. And it was afterwards reflecting with them. Yeah, that definitely made a big difference in my sleep. I'm like, okay, cool. So one of the things that I've tried to do since, turning over towards discipline and moving away from punishment is basically staying on my child's team. Like, this is kind of the thing that I've noticed is that before I was drawing a hard line in the sand and I was saying, I'm on the right side, you're on the wrong side. You did the wrong thing and you need to get back in line, basically. And not necessarily at the time telling them, like, sometimes I'd talk about why, but I would just be like, dude, this is it. This is the rule. You follow it because I said so, kind of thing. And it was messing with our relationship. And it's totally disempowering to children too, when they're just being told, listen to what I say because I said so, and you need to listen to authority. Blind obedience is not healthy. Like, I don't think it's good for anyone to be blindly obedient. I think we see the results of that happening in bad ways. The results are of adults that are just blindly obedient. This is not an empowered society when people are blindly obedient. We need people that are willing to say, hey, I want to tune into what I value. I want to tune into what I think is real and true and right. And I want to be able to stand up for that. And that's important that we all are able to do that. And so I want my children to feel that way. And one of the ways I think we do that at an early age is say, hey, here's the challenge that we see. These are the consequences that we're seeing of this challenge. How do you want to solve it? Because it's your challenge. What ideas do you have? And then the child will buy in where they have weigh in.
No. Well, it's, anybody who's a parent, I would assume would agree with like the fact that sometimes parenting is hard, right? And
100%.
Like, and then you get frustrated with yourself, or I get frustrated with myself when even when I lose my temper. Like, that's something I sort of struggle with. Is just when you feel like you've explained it or tried to help them through it, and then maybe you've had a long day or whatnot, and it's just you're at the end of your rope and you feel like losing it. And what I can say is, like, it almost like helps me be a better parent if I can tie the consequence, instead of just dishing them out because I'm frustrated or I've had a bad day. It becomes easier for me if I can tie the consequence to something that's more related to the real world. So like back to the, analogy about using bad words. Like, at some point, I'm not truly going to let them be a potty mouth. I said that a bad word is not really a bad word. The reality is, if they're truly like potty mouths around the house, I'll probably have another sit down and say, okay, well, the consequence, since you're not going to do this, I'm going to take away like some social time or some other thing that that models what it's like to have that consequence. If they're not fearful of it, I'm going to have to impose some consequence at some point. To me, that makes the parenting more intuitive. So I don't have to constantly keep second guessing myself about whether I did something right or beating myself up because I responded to something irrationally. I can just kind of take a pause and be like, okay, what would the real world consequence be if I did this in the real world?
That's a great question.
How can I like give them a taste of that?
Yes.
Before they totally mess this up for themselves.
And I'll tell you how we address that kind of stuff in my family. I love that question. What would the real world consequence be if I did this? So I use that kind of question to frame up, basically when we have to impose consequences because no one else will. For example, if your child is being absolutely disastrous in the store or at a restaurant, no one else is really going to come and tell you. At least most people aren't bold enough to tell you, hey, dude, nobody can enjoy their dinner here right now. Like, your child is absolutely ruining dinner for everyone. Most people aren't going to be that bold to tell it. And they're not going to experience the consequence. However, if you as an adult were acting like that, people would not hesitate to say, hey, bud, you got to get out of this restaurant. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we have to impose ourselves there. And so like, I think that question is like, what would the consequence be if I were to do this? What would that be? With my little one, for example, he doesn't use foul language. He uses harsh language. Oh, you idiot. You're going to die for that. And I'm like, whoa. Dude, that is harsh. Like that is like it's not like he didn't say any curse word, but you're like, it's just too harsh. It's too dark, man. Yeah. And so what I've decided to do is I say, you're welcome to talk like that, but I'm not going to be around you. And so then with my neighbors, their daughter, I've said, yeah, some of this language is too harsh and foul or whatever. And they said, I told them what I said, and they're like, hey, you're welcome to talk like that, but we don't want you talking like that around here. Mm-hmm. Like, see, that's the way it rolls, man. If you're going to talk like that, you're going to lose friends. You're going to lose the opportunity to be certain places. With my son in the car, for example, if he starts saying that, I literally say, you're welcome to talk like that, but I'm going to have to get out of the car. Now, he does not want to be in the car alone. First of all, he's trapped in a car seat. That would not be fun at all. And so he's like, okay. So he just stops. He stops talking like that because dad doesn't want to be around someone who's talking like that. And same thing whenever he's using his emotions, like if his emotions are too, he's not trying to get a grip on them. Sometimes he gets disappointed. Of course, he's had a long day at school or whatever. Now he's cranky because I'm not going to go to P. Terry's or whatever and get him a milkshake. So he's losing it. I really want a milkshake. I want that milkshake. And I'm like, hey, totally entitled to be dissatisfied. You're 100% like, I won't take that from you. You can be as unhappy as you want, but you can't try to punish me with your emotions. You can't try to make my ride miserable because you're upset. You're going to have to process your emotions in a different way. And if you really can't process these emotions without like screaming or whatever, I will pull the car over and I'll just wait. I'll just wait until you can finally get yourself under control. And generally, he does within just a few minutes. However, there have been a couple times where I've had to pull the car over and I just sit there this is where actions speak louder than words, because usually you could sit there and go, now be quiet. Stop your whining. Yeah. Stop the screaming, man. Hey, what did I tell you?
Over right now?
I'm going to pull it over. I'm going to do this.
Wear somebody out. Yeah.
So you just keep saying the thing. So instead, I'll say it one time. Mm-hmm. It starts erupting again. Boom. I'm on the first turn off. And then I just park and I just say, when you're ready. Yeah. And I'll just kind of get into looking at something, looking at my phone, just keeping myself preoccupied, mostly trying not to freak out, like trying to, regulate my nervous system. Because of course a kid screaming can dysregulate our nervous systems faster than anything. And so I'm trying to regulate my nervous system, not trying to get overwhelmed with the fact that we got to be somewhere at a certain time, just literally just like, okay, we're just going to sit here. And it only takes a few minutes. He's like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. And he's a little firecracker. My son has he's very emotional in all kinds of ways. He's very, very happy, very excited, very playful, just really just got high emotion. And when he's upset, man, he is upset and he's going to let you know. But the actions speak louder than words. Sometimes we talk too much instead of just taking action after you've said it once. And I don't mean like a threat. Because notice how if I say, you can talk like that, but I'm not going to be around you, I'm focusing on what I'm going to do, not what I'm trying to make him do. My mom or father would have tried to make me stop my talking so they could have peace, right? And what I've realized, I can take my peace and I'm just not going to be around you. And the child doesn't like that. So they'll modify their behavior to be around you.
Well, if you're full of threats and, if you're full of threats all the time and you're constantly trying to, figure out how to scare them into doing what you want and you don't follow up on it, then then there's not that respect for the boundaries or the rules or whatever. I mean, that's another thing too, is just this constant barrage of threats. I have to correct myself about that sometimes, because I don't want to take on the, I'm trying to push off the consequence and enforcing the consequence or whatnot. So I have to like be disciplined myself and, execute on the consequence that I've already spelled out. And then the other thing I was, thinking of when you were talking about that was, my parents sometimes as a punishment would put me in my room. Right. Which that wasn't terrible at all. That was actually good, because I could re-regulate and kind of grow up a little bit and come back to, come back into the situation and be, more chill and all that. And I think that was kind of that was a form of timeout before timeout was cool.
Right.
But now it's like, it's almost overused, the whole timeout thing. But it's still great. But I have, one of the ways I've sort of flipped this on myself is, taking my own timeout. When I'm about to hit that boiling point, I'm like, all right, guys, I got to take a timeout. Exactly. And I'll just like leave and go in my room and shut the door for a minute, talk and chill out and like think clearly about like what's going on and why I'm so upset, or what the fuss is all about, or what the consequence needs to be, and if I actually need to follow up on something, or if it's just my own sort of emotional state that's making it way worse than it really is. Sometimes the kids just need to be kids, and they're just totally loud, and they're just trying to play, and they're trying to mess with each other or whatever, and that's just how they kind of work things out. So sometimes that doesn't fit what I want in that moment, so I get anxious and kind of worked up, and sometimes just like putting myself in timeout is really kind of the best solution.
100%. I can only get I can only get two words out. I'm out. And they know it's like, I'm out. My lid is flipped. I have no control over my prefrontal cortex anymore. There's nothing useful going to happen here. I'm out. And that means I've got to go. I've got to get out of here. So I say I'm out. It's like a Kramer on a Seinfeld episode or something. I'm out. And I just like fly out the door. And then I go, process with myself. And that it is a more effective way. I will say there's a positive way to do timeouts and a negative way to do timeouts, in my opinion. The negative way to do timeouts is the old school timeout. Go in timeout for this random number of time. Go out in timeout for 10 minutes. Go sit in timeout for 5 minutes. Go in there for 20 minutes, whatever it might be. The reason I say it's a negative is because it's a consequence that's usually unrelated. So for example, like they're fighting.
It's not the real world. It's not the real world consequence.
Yeah. It's just like this thing that we randomly impose. Now, if it's that, hey, dude, you're acting erratic. We're trying to have a peaceful moment here. You're like basically ruining the peace, right? So you need to take space. Having a child take space and them being able to choose where that space would be, for the most part, is different than a timeout where I say exactly where that space is and for what period of time. So what I've learned to do is the positive side of timeout, which is, yes, either A, I take the timeout, which is me, again, deciding what I'll do instead of what I'm going to try to make my child do. Where I said, for example, hey, if you're going to talk like that, I'm not going to be around you. Right now, if I'm cooking dinner and I can't leave the kitchen and he's talking like that in the kitchen, I might have to say, hey, I can't take space right now. You're taking space. Like I'm in the kitchen cooking for everyone. So then the timeout that I use is when you are prepared to be calm or quiet or operate within whatever expectations they are, whether it's the restaurant expectations, the grocery store expectations, whatever, when you are capable and good and well you are, you're welcome to be with us. So there is no specified time. It's on their time. So for example, with my little guy, I might say, hey, bud, when your voice is an inside voice, then you're welcome to play in the living room.
Well, it's funny when you do that too. They'll you can go back and say, "Are you ready now?"
Yeah.
And they'll say no, and they'll be angry, right?
Yeah.
No,
I'm not ready.
I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And you come back another few minutes. No, I'm not ready. And then you come back a few more minutes. Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. And
they know.
They know exactly. And so I tell my son, I'm like, here's the deal. I don't want you in your room. I don't want you in timeout. So I'm staying on their side. I'm still on their side. And even though I don't want you there, I also definitely don't want to hear a little child screaming in the living room while we're trying to have a peaceful evening. So this is how it works. The living room is a peaceful place. We need you to use your inside voice right now. And when you are able to do that, you are 100% welcome to join us. And if you can't do that, you need to be in your room. And it's that's the kind of timeouts that I do. And they become way more effective than a random, consequence where they're just sitting in there for 20 minutes stewing.
Yeah. Well, the other great thing about the self-imposed timeout is kind of back to your cherry pie consequence, where you leave the room, shut the door, and then you hear the magic of them having a conversation about what just happened.
Yeah.
Why is dad so mad?
Yeah.
What did you do? No, what did you do? Then at first they're kind of fighting and blaming each other. Then they kind of well, no, we should have done this. Well, okay, I should have done. They start taking ownership of it.
Right.
And well, we should probably say sorry when he comes out. Right. You hear the magic of the conversation where they're
they're process
together, processing it. And then, it doesn't happen every time, but when it happens, that's magical when they can take ownership of causing some disruption in the family or whatever. And they know that was part of their consequence was, me leaving the moment and them left to just figure out what just happened and why. That's magical.
Well, there was a point, and I don't remember exactly what had happened, but something had happened when I was younger. And I have and at this point in my life, I have two of my brothers are living with me and my family. And so there's three of us in the house. I came from a family that was kind of separated at different times. And at this point, I've got two of my full blood brothers living with me, and we were getting in trouble for something. And my dad had us in a line, and he's like, "Who did it? Who did this thing?" And I remember I was like, "Dad, I'm sorry, Dad. It was me." And my dad was like, "Okay, well, then you're going to," and then as he goes to talk, my little brother goes, no, Dad, it was me. It was the spark, I don't know what there was a Spartacus or movie or something like that, where the person's like, "I'm Spartacus." No, I'm Spartacus. It was literally one of those moments where my other brother goes, "No, Dad, it was me." And my dad just starts laughing. He's like, "Well, was it all of you or what? What happened here? Why are you guys all stepping up?"
Can't take you all down.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of a cute moment where my dad's like, "Okay, what's going on here? Are you guys trying to mess with me, or really was it all of you?" It was like, "Nah, we were all it." Brandon's the first one who admitted it, but we were all involved. But that cherry pie story, you mentioned that, and I feel because I don't think I maybe I have told it on the podcast, but it was one of those moments. I'll tell you what it was. It was one of those moments where I was at my wit's end. I had tried so many things and nothing was working. And my child had been misbehaving at school. This was a regular thing that I was experiencing. I was having to talk to the principals all the time, go up to the front desk to the office and talk to the teacher and have parent conferences, try to figure out his behavior and what are we going to do. And it was just constant. It was never ending challenges at school. And so this particular week, I had already been up there 2 times, and I had this thought in my head about kind of reverse psychology. And I thought, what if I did the opposite? He's already been, grounded, video games taken away, can't go to friends' houses. He's had a spanking. He
didn't have much left.
I mean, what do I have? What else do I have in this arsenal? I've got literally nothing. Nothing has worked. So what makes me believe that if I come there today and I give him the mean eye and I, spank him when he gets home, and I tell him he's grounded, and I do any of this stuff. What reason do I have to believe that tomorrow will be different? Mm-hmm. I'm like, what if I did the opposite? What if I literally tried something I've never tried, and I did the opposite? And in my head, I was like, I don't even know what that would be. Like, do I give him a hug for having a bad day? Do I what would I do? And I was like, and in my head, I was like, reward him. And I was like, that's so weird. It's just weird to give him a reward. And I was like, just do it. Just go and see what happens. Experiment. And so one of the things I knew that he liked was cherry pie. So I go by this bakery on the way to his school, and I get this big fat piece of cherry pie. And I show up at his school, and I go to the front office, and I say, hey, I'm here to pick Sheldon up. He wasn't having a good day. And he's sitting in the office, and I said, hey, bud, how's it going? And he's like looking at me like, why are you happy? What is wrong with you? And in my head, I was kind of excited because I was like, this is going to be so weird.
Can't wait to see what
totally
happens.
Weird him out.
Even if it's bad. Yeah.
Even if it's bad, I'm just like, this is like, whatever. We've already made this a more interesting day because we're not doing the same thing. And so I pick him up, and he's like, okay. And I'm like, all right, thank you guys. We'll try again tomorrow. And he's got this whole cheery attitude. And then we go get in the truck. And whenever he gets in the truck, he sees that there's this piece of pie, and he goes to move it out of the seat, to get it, so he can sit there. And I said, hey, that's for you. And he's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? I said, I got that piece of cherry pie for you. And he's like, why? And I was like, because I love you. He's like, okay, I don't, Dad, this is weird, Dad. And I was like, what do you mean it's weird? He's like, I don't know, like, why you got me this. And I was like, I got you that cherry pie because isn't cherry pie your favorite? He's like, yeah, Dad, I love cherry pie, but like, why did you get this for me? And I was like, because I love you. That's why I got you a piece of cherry pie. And he's like, did you not know that I got in trouble? And I was like, no, I got you this after I found out you were in trouble. I got you this on the way to get you. And he's like, what in the world? Like, he's like going, is this a joke? Is this a trick, Dad? Is that like, just, I don't understand. Is this a trick? And I was like, no, it's legitimately cherry pie. He's like, is it poison in it? And I was like, no, it's not. There's no poison in it. And he's like, okay. He's like, Dad, honestly, like, I just feel weird even holding it. And I was like, oh, interesting. What's that about? He goes, I feel like guilty. He's like, I don't feel like I can eat this pie. And I was like, okay. And he goes, can I, he's like, he was acting so weird with these. Like, I just want to put it down. So he just puts it down on the floorboard. So you put it down. It's yours. It's whatever you want to do with it. And he said, Dad, yeah, it's just really, really, really weird. And I'm like, and it is so different than anything else we'd ever experienced because I'm usually very livid and like explaining like all the things he did wrong. And your teacher told me and tell me what happened. I don't want to hear about the other kids. I know it was you, and stop blaming other people. Take some personal responsibility. What's wrong with you? How many days do we have to do this? How many times have I said that? I've said all of that so many times. So now we're having this very unique experience. He couldn't hold it. And he told me that he felt guilty. And I said, can you tell me why you feel guilty? And he said, well, I guess like, Dad, honestly, like I was disrespectful to my teacher. I started smarting off. I was trying to get people's attention. I wasn't letting people focus. When my teacher was trying to correct me, I kept being a jerk to her. And then finally she had enough and she sent me to the office. And I said, oh, okay. And in my head was like going, like, it was like little jackpot was like, like you hit the jackpot. It's like, holy crap, the kid is taking personal accountability. He never once told me at this point about other kids or anything. He's literally taking full on responsibility for what happened, telling me he's a bit of a jerk to his teacher, that he feels guilty, etc. And so I'm like, man, this is already better than it usually is. And then I said, and then what, but yeah, you did that stuff. But don't you kind of want that cherry pie? He's like honestly, Dad, like, I just feel like it would literally make me sick if I ate it. And I go, okay. I said, so tell me, why do you think that that's a problem? And he starts telling me, he's like, well, some of these kids really actually want to get into a good college. Some of these kids like really are trying, and like, I'm just kind of being a jerk to them. My teacher, like, she's been, trying to explain to me that like teaching isn't always easy when you have a lot of kids. And like, it just seems like I don't really care about her. And I'm just like, man, dude, you're just like totally opening up, man. You're really like, I really think this is a mature way of you communicating what's going on. And he's like, you really? And I was like, yes, dude. I said, usually you're like telling me about other kids. You're telling me the teachers got it out for you. You're like never really doing it this way. I'm really impressed, man. He's like, really? I'm like, dude, 100%. This is what you got to do to change things. You got to acknowledge this kind of stuff. He's like, oh, yeah, I guess I am. And I'm like thinking in my head, like, dude, this is like a night and day difference from our normal experience. And then I said, what would you like to change and how would you do it? And so he told me exactly what he wanted to do, how he would change the next day. The following day, he does amazing. His teacher writes me an email, whatever you guys did, whatever conversation you had, it had a big impact on Sheldon. Sheldon came today. He was totally like sitting up his desk. He was respectful. He was kind. He was asking me if he could help me with anything. He apologized about yesterday. She's like, this is a completely different experience. Whatever conversation you guys have was really impactful to him. And in my head, I'm thinking, I flipping rewarded the kid. Like I gave the kid a piece of cherry pie. Now, granted, I didn't give him a reward for misbehavior, but I did something so different than what you would normally expect to occur. And what my instincts said, my instincts told me to spank him, ground him, do all those things. And they were 100% wrong. What he needed was for me to create space where I connected with him, let him know he was loved beyond anything he could do, and invite him to reflect on what was going on and then change who he wants to be and the kind of way he wants to show up on his own accord, not because I told him, but because he felt a certain way, believed certain things about himself and his teachers and his fellow students, and he wanted to be different. And so he went to school and made a difference. And in that day, I was like, I'll never forget this moment. Like, this is teaching me so much. Like, I need to remember that if you've tried something a couple times and it's not working, do the opposite. Like, one of the tools I tell dads to do is I need a hug. In the middle of your child, you guys are having a problem. You're really upset. He's upset. There's a power struggle going on. You just stop. You look at him and you take a really deep breath and go, dude, I need a hug. It is such a pattern disrupt. It is literally like, they're like, what? You're like, I really need a hug. They're like, okay, that's just weird. I'm like, I need one right now. And then they're like, okay. And then they're hugging you. And when you hug, the whole thing is kind of healed. And you go, can we work this out? And then the child's like, yes, dude, what do you want to do? And then you guys are both like cooperating.
Yeah, how different would our relationships be elsewhere in our lives if we kind of had the same sort of disruptive attitude, healthy disruptive. Right. But yeah, you open up and you create this. I mean, what I hear from your story is this: like, you create this safe place. That's everything's dangerous these days, right? Like, whether it's public shame or guilt or just like harsh consequences for different behaviors or whatnot. Like if as parents we become a safe, trusted place, then like in your case, he was accountable for his own actions. He self-governed, from that point forward. He thought through the consequences and kind of how he was going to have to suffer from his own decision making. If and when they make mistakes, they can kind of experience the consequences on their own, and it was inflicted, and they know that's not on us. That's not, we're not the ones that to be feared, because we didn't impose the punishment. They suffer the consequences on their own. But sometimes, back to the real world scenario, it's like they can make the right decision sometimes, and there's still some consequence that's out of all of our control. Things don't always work out our way, right? And once again, that takes it off us. I mean, if we tell them to do something a certain way and there's still a negative consequence, or it doesn't work out, then a lot of the blame can be put on us when they need to just know that that's just the way things work. Sometimes it's not always a fair scenario. And through this process, they can be in tune with their own values. It's very clear to our kids what our values are, even if we don't state them. But this gives them a chance to like know ours, compare it against their experiences, and fine tune their own values and kind of know what they are, despite, in your case with your kid, he probably had a reputation at school for being a certain kid, but he was able to kind of create his own, forecast his own future and decide what behaviors he wanted to do to get the result he was looking for. And you contrast that with like in a scenario or a family where it's not safe to go to your parents because there's like harsh punishment from a militant parent, and a lot of times become closed off, and 50% of the time they may be very disciplined and obedient in the household, as we've discussed, but the other half of the time when they're not there, they're kind of they're being disobedient, kind of out of earshot. So, it seems like that's sort of the central theme today, is just creating a safe place and create sort of self-governed, people, small people with their own values and their own ability to kind of think through real world consequences at a very early age. And it just takes the burden away from, takes some of the hardships away from being a kid, but also takes some of the difficulty around being a parent away, and just makes it more intuitive and easier to kind of work through. So.
Yeah. I was just shooting a video this morning. One of the popular questions on YouTube is how to raise a confident child. And so I'm making a video today. We're going to edit it, but the video is basically explaining how there are three primary reasons I see children not be confident. One is that we punish for mistakes. So what we teach them is to not make a mistake. And unfortunately, that's the wrong message, because mistakes are part of the formula for success. You didn't learn how to walk without mistakes. You didn't learn how to ride a bike without mistakes. You didn't learn how to read or write without mistakes. You won't learn how to do anything of significance without mistakes. And so there are a lot of adults out there that are afraid to go for what they really want. And they get stuck in analysis paralysis, and they get stuck basically thinking that they want to do something, but they're afraid that it won't work. And that's really just a fear of making a mistake and afraid of what that might look like. So I think when we punish for mistakes, we are unfortunately missing the opportunity, because mistakes are such an important part of the formula, and they're great places to have a learning moment. And so we got to work on that. Number two is that we save, or we're overly protective. We take on our children's challenges. And what I found is the more you can keep handing back those challenges to your child. Right now, the challenge I keep trying to hand back to my little guy is tying his own shoes. There's so many shoes these days that you can put on that are Velcro and little bungee cords and all these different things. I'm like, man, how old is the kid going to get before he doesn't know how to tie? I don't want to have a little kid that doesn't know how to tie his own laces. This is ridiculous, So when they're untied, I'm like, hey, you going to tie those? And he's like, I can't tie them. And I'm like, well, you working on that? So trying to hand that over. But then it gets to be stuff like, for example, laundry. Are you going to sort your own laundry? My teenager now does all of his own laundry, sets all of his own appointments, manages a lot of the different things from his bank account to bills that he has, different stuff. He literally manages that. And I kind of hang back and allow him to do it. And I support him in that. So for example, when it came to the setting appointments, I told him, these are the things they're going to ask, here's the things you're going to most commonly be asked and what you need to, say. They're going to ask you what time of day works for you. You need to look at your schedule. They're going to ask you to confirm. They're going to ask you if you have an email address that they can send it to or something like that. These are just the common things. And so now he sets all of his own appointments. And with the orthodontist and everything, he manages all that. I get his invitation. Wow. So I'll say, invite me to your orthodontist appointment. So I have it on my calendar. So then he'll set it and then send me an invitation. 16 years old, he's doing that. So I know these are important things that when, at what point do you teach them, right? Like it's good to start them early. So, and then also he feels confident because of that. He feels confident in his ability to do things because he has a job and because he sets appointments and because he manages his own laundry in his own room. Like I don't have, when the cleaners come, I'm like, that's his room. We're going to let the teenager, he doesn't have a cleaner yet. He gets cleaners for the rest of the house, but one day he'll be old enough to get cleaners. If he wants the cleaner to come do something, I'm like, you could throw her an extra $20 and she'll clean your room. Like you got to pay for it. But the other thing is that I see us telling instead of asking. And so when we're telling all the time, when our children have mistakes, when our children face obstacles or challenges, a lot of times they're looking outside of themselves, which we do too. We look to Google or something like that to find answers. But I mean, like, we even do this a little too quickly. Sometimes we need to just take a moment to sit in there and reflect, what would be a good thing to experiment with. And that every time we try something, it's just an experiment. Run the experiment, see if it works, see what data you get back. Just like the cherry pie thing, it was just an experiment. What happens if I do this? And so I think asking children, so instead of telling them all the time, even with stuff like the routines and stuff like that, what's the next thing on your routine? What's the next step for us to be ready to go? What do you need to remember to have everything you need for today's field trip? What are, my 6-year-old had the list. He knew exactly what I need. I need a sack lunch. I need sunscreen. I need a sun hat. I need, my class t-shirt. He knew the checklist. And then instead of me keep telling him, make sure you have your shirt, make sure you have, I say, what all do you need in order for us to be ready to go? And that asking helps the child go, hey, I know these things. And if I don't, I can figure out the answers to these questions. With older kids, with Sheldon, for example, I use what's your plan for? And even if he doesn't have a plan for something, he can kind of come up with something pretty quickly, right? So I might say, hey, what's your plan for having your room cleaned before we have guests over tonight? That's kind of assuming that he could have a plan instead of me going, dude, your room's a total trash, man. You better get it cleaned up before the guests come over. Where I'm telling him what to do. I can just ask him, what's your plan for managing your time today? What's your plan for being on time for work today with everything we've got going on? What's your plan for is a great way to ask. And so I'm like addressing these 3 things because I think if you don't do these, if you punish for mistakes, if you save and overly protect, and if you tell them everything they're supposed to do and not do, you're going to raise a child who's not going to feel very confident without you. And is also going to feel like they should be afraid of failing out there.
Yeah. And I was fortunate because I never really felt like I was afraid to make a mistake. My dad was, really strict. And I still, I think part of it at the time, and he always told me what to do. I was, as a child, I constantly felt like I was guessing the right answer and I never really could think through really why I was choosing what I was choosing. I was trying to guess what my dad is going to tell me to do.
Right.
I think my mom was less strict, but she was really supportive of me being me. I'm curious. I'm just trying to think through right now, even how I became less fearful to make mistakes and how I developed confidence. I do think that in my dad's credit, I saw, number one, he loosened the reins as I, grew up, and we had a much deeper, more respectful relationship as I became older and as I graduated college and started getting some skins on the wall that, maybe he didn't have in his, childhood. And I started earning a little bit more respect. I could see him kind of open up and become more safe. And number 2, I think also looking back on it, and I may be sort of overly psychoanalyzing it, but, I could see him be a little bit different with his friends and, family or whatnot than he was with me. So that inconsistency, as I guess some people would say, well, that's not healthy because he's, inconsistent with me versus everybody else. But in my, looking back on in my world, I could see that this was actually a really caring person who was really friendly, and he wasn't so strict with himself. He was really he had a lot of confidence and he had some success and he was really good with other people. So that actually, that inconsistency probably was a good thing for me to know that his strictness wasn't the end all be all, that and the light at the end of the tunnel was there was a real human being inside of this, like inside of this militant figure. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that was, that's the best way to look at it, but that's kind of, I guess, the story I tell myself looking back on it.
Yeah, I have that with my son, where, I tell him, like, here's the deal, dude, is I don't want to have reins on you, but the only way I can let go is to have trust. Like, you earn your freedom, because privilege and responsibility, those are equal. The more responsible you are, the more privilege you'll have. And so I can only do that in a good mindset, like, or feel good about it, if I know that you're going to be responsible with the length that I give you in your chain, essentially. Mm-hmm. If you're going to hang yourself with it every time, well, I might need to tighten it up, because there's no way that I could just in good conscience, like, just keep giving you all of that freedom. So I need to know that when I give you freedom, you're going to be responsible, so that I don't have to second guess myself or to worry, because worrying and thinking about, whether you're safe or not is not good for either of us. It makes me not trust you. It makes me like close up and clam up, and it makes your experience tighter. When you start acting responsibly and you show me that you're capable of doing certain things, I loosen way up so that you can have that freedom, because I don't, and I've told him, and he knows, we have that talk. I don't want you to be an obedient child. I want you to be self-disciplined. I want you to be able to operate on your values and what you believe is right. And I want to see you embody some self-respect, some self-reliance, self-care, things like that, so that I can completely let go, because that's really what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to let our children become their own adult. And it can be a really tough thing to do. And today, I think kids are younger than ever. I was very different 16-year-old than my 16-year-old. And my 16-year-old is pretty mature compared to a lot of 16-year-olds. And that's a scary thing when you think about, like, most of us had already been doing quite a bit of work. We were raised in a different time. Times have changed. Like, we can look back 20 years and things are so different. Mm-hmm. But so we have a big challenge. Life is also a bit harder on kids. It's not such an innocent, sweet world as it once was. We all talk about how we used to go outside and play, and nobody ever worried. You'd run to the neighbor's house, and it was just a sweet thing. You could knock on people's doors. People don't even they're afraid to knock on each other's doors now. They text each other for everything, and they're like, they don't want to impose on anything. And so we just have a different world. And then kids also there's a ton of sports and extracurricular activities, and they got to do the STAR test in Texas. We got to do the STAR test, and we got to do, hit all these measures. And it's just a tough world for kids, and we need them to feel confident. It's also a world where everybody is telling them how to think and feel. There's likes and dislikes and all these different things that are extrinsic. They're telling them from the outside in instead of from the inside out. And so we have to do a good job of keep asking our kids, hey, why is that important to you? And what did you learn from this? And what do you see here? And with whenever we watch movies or stories or read a book or anything, or we hear them tell us about something that happened with kids, process it with them a little bit and see what their real feelings are inside, so they can start to build that muscle that they have, feelings inside, that they can tell what's morally right. Kids have a really good moral compass when you really tap in. Some kids are cruel, but at the same time, like, kids generally have a pretty good sense of like right or wrong and how they feel about things. And we just got to keep helping tune into that with our little ones.
Yeah, man, I call it the good old day syndrome, right? You look back in our day, like, things were so much better for whatever reason. We could go outside and knock on doors or all the things that you mentioned, or it's totally true. And then our parents, said the same thing about their childhood.
Yeah.
We had all the, between the Ataris and the Nintendos and, whatever else, like their times were different.
Such innocent games compared to the games today too.
Well, the content of the games, that was what I was going to mention, but like, even our grandparents talk about how they, went to see the movies for a nickel or had a soda for a penny. It's like, okay, well, that sounds great. Okay. But like, times are different and we have to think a little bit different. We have to make adjustments between the content of games and the content of television and social media and the impact of all these likes and dislikes and how many friends you have and the social pressures at school to wear certain clothes is just different. The level of competition, the amount of things that have to be learned in school, there's just so much pressure. I think we don't, at least most of the people I know of my parents' generation don't really respect, it's not a reciprocal thing. You're supposed to respect the parent, but like, you don't have to respect the kid. The kid is going through a lot of things these days. And to understand that and to really, unfortunately, we have to grow our kids up a little bit faster so they can filter through and not make the big mistakes, the real consequential mistakes. So we kind of have to, I think, kind of what we're, again, back to the central theme today is letting them understand how to make decisions, not telling them what to do, because there's not a playbook for these kids to know exactly how to react in every social situation or every online situation. They have to be able to see around corners, not just know what to say and when to say it, but like how to really think through, bigger things. Cause there's more coming that like, we just can't even get our head around yet. And I believe that to be true. I don't know what's coming in the future. If I can teach my kids or have them, understand how to think through certain challenges and know what their values are, then I can trust that they can make the best decisions for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at even, for example, back when we were younger, you used to be able to trust, or we believed we could trust, things like the government. We had some sense of security there. I think anybody really feels that sense of security and safety and that warmth that we once maybe felt, where it's like, I don't know what to trust anymore. It's like, I don't know if I could, these people all seem to be running their own little agenda. And so there's that, and kids hear that commotion, they hear adults chattering about, these systems, and they're disappointed. Maybe that's been around for a long time and everything, but there's also, like you said, there's the video game content, there's the social content that they're exposed to, there's the massive amounts of, remember when album covers if there was a sexually explicit album cover, that was like, oh my gosh. And now today it's like every little picture and cover and everything they see has explicit content in it. Like the radio is full of, innuendos and all kinds of different messages. You're like, I don't know if I want my kids to hear all this stuff. And it's hard to keep you're not going to, it's like, how can you shelter your kids in this world where the information is just like overload everywhere? Even when you think you could, you can't. And so you have to help them at an earlier age process, morals and values and virtues and all of these things. And it's a challenge for us all. And it's also an opportunity. It's one of the greatest opportunities. I'm a firm believer that every challenge comes with it a seed of opportunity. And the greatest challenges help pull out the greatest parts of our character. When you think back on your life developing things like grit, resilience, determination, all of these different things, they weren't pleasant experiences that drew that skill out of you. And I think today, the challenges that we face will have the same kind of opportunity for us. They're going to help us develop some skill, some virtue, some characteristic that will be useful if we answer the calling in a way that's conscious and we're actually intentional about it.
Yeah. I just looked it up. There's the average. I was struggling to remember exactly what I had heard about the average, child of what age they are when they're first exposed to pornography, and it's 11 years old.
Wow!
And 22% of all online pornography usage is consumed by kids under the age of 18. 22%. That's crazy. So it's almost, kind of back to like, just thinking differently. It's like, we gotta, there's no more like having conversations with the birds and the bees when they're of age.
Oh yeah. It
is incorporating, topics like that into everyday conversation, because if you're not having them, they're having them with somebody else, or they're discovering it with the internet. And that is like the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So
you need to be your kid's greatest resource for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They need to be able to,
you can't get that from a top down, management type, parenting structure. You have to be an open book in order to earn that sort of trust and safety from them.
And I think one of the ways to do it is to stop punishing. When your children make mistakes, it's a learning opportunity. It's time to get in there and say, what can we learn from this? What happened? What did we learn? What will we do differently? And how do you want to proceed? Help your child wrestle with the question, what kind of person do I want to be? Not what will happen if I don't do it. Oh, what will they give me if I do it? That's punishment and reward, two sides of the same coin. But instead the question, what kind of person do you want to be? Because if you can keep reflecting that on your child will start to embody their own virtues, their own values, and you'll start to see them stand up for what they believe in, stand up for what they believe is right and wrong. And when they do that, you go, man, I'm raising this little child. This child is actually willing to do what is right. Not because I told them, but because that's who they want to be. They want to be this kind of person. My son wants to be disciplined when it comes to his health. The kid works out like every day and he eats healthy. And you go, how's there a teenager out there eating healthy? He gets made fun of at school because he won't eat candy. The kids are always trying to shove candy. What's wrong with you? Why don't you like candy? He's like, I love candy. It's not that I don't like candy. He's like, but it's going to totally mess with my calories. I'm trying to be fit.
Man, that is hardcore.
Yeah. He's 16 years old and he cares about that kind of stuff. The little one, if you asked him, like, what do you think about sugar? And so he's like, I don't care. I love sugar, right. But one day maybe he'll have his own decision like, hey, I want to be a healthy individual. I don't let him eat as much candy as he wants, but I know that if you were to reflect on the two of them, one will tell you, yeah, I'm not doing that. And the other one will tell you, I'll do as much as you'll give me. Well, cool, man. This has been so much fun. I feel like I've actually kind of gone over a little bit here with your time, but I'm super appreciative, Brice. We're going to definitely get another fishing trip on the books. Yes, I will take them out again. And in fact, let's run to the land cut. Let's make a memory and haul in some big ones like that trout that we hauled in. And let's do it.
Thanks so much, man. And good luck to you guys, and everything you're doing is just amazing. And pass along your message to as many friends and other dads that I know. But I'm a big fan of what you're trying to do here. And just thanks for letting me be a part of it.
I appreciate it, Brice. Cool. The mission is well worth it. That's what I'll say. It's well worth it. It's cool to work with guys like you, fathers like you, get to see the kind of impact that we can have when you think about the fact that if we impact your children are probably all going to have children. And that is such a huge generational impact that we can have. Yeah. The world needs it more than ever. I appreciate dads like you that are stepping up and really just serving your kids at the highest level and being willing to learn and grow and keep at it and keep, pursuing. Yeah. I call it in the pursuit of dadly.
Yeah, well, faking. Some of us are faking it as we go.
Hey, you got to fake it till you make it.
I've written down a few notes today. I think I've learned a handful of things today, which will help me. So I think we just have to constantly reinvent this to stay out ahead of it. But
so much of it is awesome. Yeah, so much of it is unlearning, which is what I've had to do. It's a little bit of unlearning and then learning some new things. But cool, man. Thank you again, Brice, and we'll talk to you soon.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've received some value from it, please share it with other dads and consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll see you in the next episode. Looking for support with your fatherhood journey? Go to BeDadly.com and take our Dadly Disposition quiz and learn helpful insights on how you can overcome power struggles with your kids.